All right, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about when you feel at the end of your rope, when you feel that life is just deteriorating and it's just so hard to stop. And so there's many ways to approach this. This could be possibly through addictions. Maybe something that just seemed harmless at the beginning now is something that you feel, you understand is destroying your life and it's killing you slowly, yet you can't seem to stop from doing that. Another way that this can take form is by loneliness. Maybe you just feel like an outcast. Another way that this can take form is by intrusive thoughts, by having intrusive or negative, toxic behavior, and you just feel that the more you do it, the more you get caught up into it, and it's just so hard to get away from it. This could take a form of just being morally bankrupt. You just feel that, hey, this is just not who I used to be. I don't recognize myself anymore. And then ultimately, this is drifting away from God, where you have realized that you just can't seem to get back to that passion that you once had for God. And I think the best way to illustrate this is through a sickness that was very common in the Bible, which actually the Bible just talks a lot about it. So it's kind of hard to just put this into just a few minutes, but I'll do my best. But this sickness is leprosy. And so leprosy was a very interesting sickness, and the reason why is because this disease wasn't just something that just killed you, just destroyed physically a person little by little, but it was a death sentence. And so it was a slow and a visible decay of being isolated from family, from being isolated from society, and even isolated from God. And by that we mean just people wanting to worship, people wanting to go to the temple, people wanting to make sacrifices, but they just couldn't. Now, I just want to put myself into the shoes of someone who had leprosy in that time. And there's three things that we can rescue here. One is that they felt unloved. And to kind of just illustrate this, I want to read from Leviticus 13:45 and 46. The leprous person who has the disease shall wear torn clothes, and let the hair of his head hang loose. He shall cover his upper lip and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. So I'm just trying to put myself into the shoes of these people, into the sandals of these people. Certainly they must have felt unloved. Although they probably knew they were loved, they just couldn't help feel unloved. They just couldn't feel the embrace, the touch, the nearness of their loved ones. So one thing is feeling unloved. Another thing is feeling unworthy. Now we're going to go to 2 Chronicles 26:20 and 21, which talks about King Uzziah. He was a leper to the day of his death, and being a leper, lived in a separate house, for he was excluded from the house of the Lord. Now, something that we see here, that despite that he was a king, he still had to be excluded from the temple. So we see here that his status could not override his condition. He just had to be outside. He had to be outcasted. And the third thing is feeling unwelcomed. And we find this in Numbers 5:1-3. Command the people of Israel that they put out of the camp everyone who is leprous. You shall put them outside the camp, that they may not defile the camp in the midst of which I dwell. So in summary, what we see here is that their condition not only defiled the holy camp in a social component, but it seems like there was a spiritual contamination attached to leprosy as well. So the way people viewed it is not just a physical condition, but a spiritual condition as well. Now, I mention all of this to get to the main point here, which is that leprosy is not just an ongoing physical decline, but it also acts as an archetype of how sick we all are, of our human sickness, of our spiritual sickness, of that decline in our spiritual condition, which eventually leads to death. There's no way around that. That's just the destination. It just leads to death. And so all that to say that we see now that in the life of Jesus, in the ministry of Jesus, so many things concerning leprosy are mentioned, even to the point where Jesus himself allows or authorizes and gives authority to his disciples to also heal those who have leprosy. So what I want to do here is just read a story that is found in the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but I'm going to be reading from Mark, and this is Mark chapter 1, verse 40. There came a leper to him, seeking him, and kneeling down to him and saying unto him, "If you will, you can make me clean." And Jesus, moved with compassion, he put out his hand and touched him and said, I want, be clean." And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy departed from him, and he was cleansed. Now the story continues, but what I find here is that Jesus does something that was completely unacceptable, which was to come near to a leper, and not just that, to touch the leper. But what's more interesting here is that he says, if you can, if you really want to, if you will, then I can be healed. And Jesus says, yes, this is exactly what I want. And I just find this so beautiful, because here we find a man who felt unloved, who felt unworthy, who felt unwelcome. And then Jesus comes along, and despite his condition, he transforms that into feeling loved, into feeling worthy, into feeling welcomed. And friend, again, leprosy is just an archetype of a bigger sickness that is out there. It's the human sickness, it's the spiritual sickness that we all face with. And as we said, this eventually leads to death. Yet Jesus comes, he takes on our body, he takes on flesh to the point where he dies. Yet he resurrects, claiming that mortal body was now immortal, so that now we can have that opportunity. And what's so incredible about this is that if we have, which you do, which I do, have that spiritual leprosy, it's through Jesus that now we can be healed. It's through Jesus that now we can be cleansed, because he took our spot. He died for you. And let me read Romans 7:24 and 25. It says, "Who shall set me free from the body of this death? Thanks be to God that through Jesus Christ, our Lord." And through this, I just want to say that you are no longer an outsider. In fact, you are now part of the family. You're redeemed. You are restored. So if there is something in your life at this moment, you feel that you are simply deteriorating, you have this leprosy. Maybe it's a broken relationship. Maybe it's seeking the same type of toxic person when you are in a relationship or seeking a relationship. Maybe this could be an addiction. Maybe it could be loneliness. Or just to put it simply, maybe you feel unloved. Maybe you feel unworthy. Maybe unwelcome. But the only way to cure that leprosy, or the only way to cure that disease, is through Jesus. And he took your spot, he took my spot, and died so that we can now have life, and life in abundance. I just want to invite you, surrender to Jesus, surrender everything to him. Let him be the cure to all of your sicknesses, to all of your diseases. Thank you for joining. We'll see you here next week.